So, welcome everyone. My name's Erty. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Salosphere Global. We specialize in health, safety, well-being, and bring all the services that corporates enjoy and can afford, but the SME market requires and can't afford. So, today I'm joined by Clare White. Clare is the CEO and founder of Connected CX. Clare empowers SME owners to turn customers and employees into lifelong fans. 25 years experience leading teams, solving critical business challenges. She helps clients uncover game-changing insights through proven people-focused strategies. And I also have Simon Nichols. Simon is the CEO and founder of Thrive Mental Health and Neurodiversity, a seasoned cloud evangelist, senior IT leader, 25 years experience, a great guy, passionate about driving growth. And we bring them together today to talk about the hidden cost of not investing in your employees. Simon, what is neurodiversity and what does it mean?
Yeah, great question, Erty. Thank you. So I think a lot of people get very confused with the term neurodiversity, and we're going to be touching upon that in this, but we wanted to get it straight out there in the open before we started because we didn't want to get halfway through the webinar and people are, actually, I don't really know what we're talking about when you talk about neurodiversity. I get culture, I get mental health, but what do we mean by neurodiversity? And what neurodiversity actually means is all of us. So it's everyone's brains, it's everyone's way of thinking. It's, if you imagine biodiversity on the planet, biodiversity means all living organisms. So the word neurodiversity actually encompasses all of us. And what you'll hear today is you'll hear certain words such as neurodiversity, you may hear neurodiverse, and you may hear the word neurodivergent. What we're starting to talk about there is actually individuals that think differently, wired differently from birth. So neurodiversity means all of us. Neurodiverse is a way to describe a group of people, group of individuals who have a different thought process, different way of thinking. And neurodivergent is typically applied to an individual. I am neurodivergent. I might be autistic, may have dyslexia, may have ADHD, therefore I am neurodivergent. I think differently from the generalized norm in society. There we go. We've got that straight out there, but I'm sure as we move forward, there'll be a few more questions about that.
Yeah. Should we just run through what we're going to cover in today's webinar? Because there's going to be a couple of kind of key areas. The first one, we're going to talk about inclusive workspaces. So Simon has introduced neurodiversity. We're going to talk about neurodiversity, well-being, and where customer experience meets these. We're going to talk about beyond compliance, so how neurodiversity and well-being enhance the customer experience. We're going to talk about neuro-inclusive customer journeys. We're going to talk about safety, accessibility, engagement. And lastly, we're going to summarize with what the overall cost of not investing in employees is to your business. Simon, the first one, inclusive workspaces. Would you just share a little bit around these stats?
Yeah, so when you think about a neurodiverse individual, when you think about someone who has gone to a medical professional for a full diagnosis, this is that they've acknowledged that they think differently. It's impacted them to a certain point in their life where they feel that without support, whether that support be medication, whether that be physical support, without support, they wouldn't be able to function as well. And so that's what we mean by when we say diagnosed. So you have been to a medical professional. 20%, 1 in 5 of us are perceived as having a neurodiverse diagnosis. Now, we're not going to get too deep into each individual neurodiverse difference, but needless to say, it's a huge number. 20%, 1 in 5 of us across the planet. This isn't just a UK statistic. This is the perception for countries that record diagnosis, 20%. Now let's take that one stage further. 70% of those individuals who are diagnosed with a neurodiverse difference also have and suffer is an interesting word, and we often have this sort of thing. Am I suffer or am I living with it? Am I able to control it? Am I able to manage it? What we mean here is that there is a high propensity of individuals who think differently in the first place to have a mental ill health condition or something that is impacting the way that they can actually live their lives. And yeah, two very interesting yet vastly different statistics around the same group of people.
That's really interesting. And just to take it one step further, I think we are looking broadly today at the workplace environment. So actually, when we look at that, the statistic is still quite shocking. 1 in 5 workers need to take time off due to poor mental health caused by stress. And when we think about stress, typically we're talking about stress that is caused in the workplace. So it's something that we need to consider. Okay.
Question for you, Simon. I can see that 20% are diagnosed. How many would you say are undiagnosed?
I know you're on fire today with the questions. There was we simply don't know. It's one of those conundrums out there. How many people go and source support? We've found through that we believe we're in an evolutionary phase at the moment where more and more people are thinking differently. Why is that? If you think about, let's even say 50 years ago, okay, 50 years ago, I'm 52 now, we had 3 television channels. We had 3 television channels, and that was it. We barely had the concept of recording. We now have at our fingertips. My wife got one of the new Apple iPhones the other day. You can click your fingers to respond to a message. We're now seeing AI increase at a rate whereby a lot of things that we felt we could do are now being done in different ways. That thought process is because we are thinking differently. Think Steve Jobs, think Bill Gates, think Richard Branson. The evolutionary pioneers, are now all these individuals with dyslexia, with ADHD, with autism. So the undiagnosis, I think, to go back to your question, we simply don't know. It could be another 20%. It could be 30%. We have this word called neurominority and neuromajority, whereby the neurominority potentially is that thought process that the minority of individuals within a workplace, within an environment, are neurodiverse, and the majority think in a societal norm. That status quo potentially may not be where we think it is. It might not be 20/80. It might be 60/40. It might be at some stage 50/50. And what that means for us as a race, as a society, is that we're going to go in different directions. We're going to have different thought processes. We're going to tackle problems and supply solutions in different ways. We're not getting political on this webinar, but we know there's a shift in the moment on the global scale, and actually thinking differently and approaching things differently is potentially how we're going to get out of whatever climate element that we're in at the moment. Very long answer to a very simple question, but thank you.
No, thank you for that. But it leads me on to one other question before we move on. If there's a neurodiverse minority, a group of people that we just simply don't know, how would you say neurodiverse friendly workplaces improve employee well-being?
This is a time asked question as well. What typically puts barriers in place, and I know Claire's got a lot of information around this, is typically the people and the environment. Okay, so that's in a very simplistic term. Where I work impacts me, who I work with impacts me. So when we start to think about those neurodiverse friendly environments, what we're really looking for is in places where people can be themselves. And Claire, I know you've got quite a lot of thought on that one.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely speak to me there, Simon, because I'm very passionate about this. Essentially, you've done a great job of kind of setting the scene around neurodiversity. And when we think about employee experience or customer experience, we're ultimately thinking about how people feel. It's about feelings, it's about emotions. And if your design, your communication, your service processes in your business don't allow for different ways of thinking or processing information, you risk unintentionally disengaging and excluding brilliant customers and employees. And ultimately, that means you're missing out on loyalty and you're missing out on growth. I know today we're talking about hidden costs, but that's hidden revenue that you are just not going to achieve because of that. Conversely, if we look at the cost side, if you are not speaking to those needs, those unique needs in the workplace or with your customer base, then ultimately you'll risk losing those customers and employees. Now, I'm sure we'll talk about this at length, but the cost to an organization of losing a valuable employee that may have been with you for years and years, has all of that valuable knowledge and experience, is immense. It's not just recruitment, it's training. It's the impact of training on the employees that surround that individual, on the manager, on their time. So actually the lost revenue through declining productivity, it's a ripple. It just ripples and escalates in terms of the costs, and it keeps going. We just don't measure it in that way. Businesses don't measure it in that way, which is why we don't have a hard figure. It is Stress Awareness Month, and I think it's something that we do need to speak to. We need to consider the stress of not allowing for these differences, not allowing for our employees and our workforce to become more aware of them, and not enabling the individuals that may be working with neurodiverse, so neurotypical working with neurodiverse, understanding the differences and the value that they bring to an organization, because they're hugely valuable.
Completely
Sorry, that was
agree.
quite long.
Yeah, no, perfect.
I can talk about it forever. I think when we're talking about inclusive design and the impact on customer interactions and the service industry and satisfaction, we do talk a lot about emotion. And when I work with any businesses, I'm always talking about understanding within their customer journeys and their employee journeys where there is friction and removing those friction points. When we talk about customer experience or even employee experience, we're talking about emotional drivers. So what emotions are driving their behavior? One of which is about making it easy. So making it easy for your customers to buy from you and your employees to engage with your business is critical. And if we're not considering neurodiverse needs, in fact, not even just neurodiverse needs, unique needs, because we're all individuals and we all have unique needs and expectations, then we're not going to have sustainable growth in an organization. And the other side of that is you will incur additional costs.
Wow. Okay, we've got a great question from Ross. Ross will answer questions at the end, but I've got that noted. Thank you. So if we can go to slide 2, Claire.
Yeah.
And slide 2 is how beyond compliance. So how neurodiversity and well-being enhance customer service. So I believe, Claire, I believe this one's you.
Yes, we've got some stats here. In fact, there are lots of statistics. When it comes to psychological safety, which is a huge, for me, a foundation or should be a foundation in any organization, there's been a lot of research and there's been a lot of data to support the fact that psychological safety will reduce stress and it will improve well-being in an organization and ultimately reduce turnover. So this is actually a McKinsey study that was completed a few years ago, but it's still very relevant. 84% of employees consider psychological safety to be one of the most valued aspects of the workplace. Now, the study goes on to say that sadly, only 26% of leaders successfully create psychological safety for their teams. So these are really critical statistics. And if you follow my page on LinkedIn or you read any of my blogs, I talk about psychological safety quite a lot. The reason being, any business, I think I do quite a lot of training around vulnerability-based trust. If you don't have psychological safety, you probably don't have trust in your organization. That means that your employees probably can't turn up authentically, whether they are suffering from a disability or they're neurodiverse, or actually they just have specific needs and requirements. They're probably not being honest about it, because they don't feel they can be. They're probably not feeling empowered to make the right decisions for your customers and your business without escalation. They probably don't feel that they can admit to making mistakes. And when you have that type of environment, sadly, you are likely to see increased stress, increased levels of burnout, increased levels of disengagement, whether neurodiverse or neurotypical. And it's really critical that organizations realize the hidden cost of not having psychological safety in your business. The Harvard Business Review is another organization that ran a really detailed piece of research on this. They actually found that organizations that actively fostered psychological safety reported 40% lower employee turnover, which is a massively key indicator of reduced stress and better mental health. They also went on to say that actually 76% showed increased engagement through their workforce. And when you have increased engagement, you get increased productivity. So 50% more productivity. So whilst we are talking about costs, this is missed revenue. that you could be driving in your organisation by focusing on your employees. And we haven't really touched on the cost to the employee themselves and to the people involved, because I've worked with employees that have and colleagues that have been suffering from stress. They really have been feeling stress and probably quite burnt out. The impact has been on the people around them, because when you come into an organisation, the atmosphere of working with a stressed colleague is challenging. You have to support them emotionally, but you also probably have to support them in terms of their productivity and helping them on a day-to-day basis, which has an effect on your own productivity. So I know I've talked for quite a long time, but an awful lot around psychological safety and how critical it is in organisations. Now, Simon, I know when it comes to neurodiverse and the strengths that they bring an organisation, this is an area that you have a lot of expertise. So would you like to share?
Again, yeah, a perfect explanation of psychological safety. It's one of those things that people just don't understand, I think, and it's not just about, as you said, it's about the whole, bringing your whole self into the office, being you, being genuine. And for a lot of individuals, neurodiverse or otherwise, being open and honest in the workplace is the last thing I want to do. I'll be judged by my manager. I'll be judged. So actually creating a culture, that's why we're here, creating a culture within the workplace that allows you to be who you are, that different person. And it might be that workplace is your home office as well. That's where I thrive. But for other people, I want to be in the office. So we need to make both of those workplaces, both of those areas accessible to being who you are. Now we have that a neurodiverse individual is also struggling with how they think, because that's not how everybody else thinks. That's not how everybody else does it. So suddenly I've got this additional layer of psychological safety in the same way as people from different nationalities, different ethnicities, different sexuality. And we're seeing a lot of things now at the moment where a lot of people are really worried about the gender ruling. There's a lot of these, and what this tends to happen, which has happened in the past, where we start to push this underground. We start to push our own thoughts and feelings down. And when you think about a neurodiverse individual in your team, when you think of organizations like Microsoft, like Google, like SAP, they actively go out and seek neurodiverse individuals, autistic, ADHD, dyslexia. And why are organizations typically hunting down individuals that normally society or move them to one side? And it's because of that incredible ability for them to be themselves. If anyone's seen Love on the Spectrum, it's a very stylized element, but you've got the individuals there being genuinely themselves. And I think that's really the heart of what we're trying to get to, is if we let people be themselves and let them use their unique talents, their skills. We're talking number recognition, we're talking pattern. Just now I was on one of my own websites, and I noticed that the dates are wrong. And I've read this hundreds of times, and suddenly I read it in a different way, a different line, and I suddenly realized the dates, and it should have been the second, and it was a TH. And it's just that hyper focus that I actually have sometimes that allows me to go in and see something I've seen 100 times before, but look at it in a different light and actually hone and focus in. So we make the environment, let's go back to that again, we make the environment psychologically safe, we make the environment fit for everyone to working, then we'll enhance those skills, enhance those strengths.
Absolutely. And just to build on that, because we are we are talking about customer service and the impact on customer experience. When you have a workforce that is all working together, they all feel able to show up as themselves and to do their best job. They are able to deliver a better experience to the customer. There's a lot of talk at the moment in customer experience circles about the scale back of DE&I initiatives. And I think it's something that is really worrying, not just for the employee and for the workplace, but also for the customer experience. Because, Simon, at the top, we talked about 20% of everyone in the world being diagnosed as neurodivergent. And that means your customers as well as your employees. Now, if you are not actively employing, engaging neurodiverse as well as other diversity in the workplace, you are going to be missing out on a huge amount of empathy for the individuals, the customers that are neurodiverse, and you're going to miss out on the skills base to actually design the experiences that are going to engage them. And that is 20% of the population. It's significant. So I think businesses really need to recognize that the hidden costs, as we're talking about, isn't just on employees, it's the missed opportunity with consumers and customers. And I think also when we talk about mental health as well, mental health is an increasing challenge in businesses, not just amongst neurodiverse, but amongst just general workplace. And one of the main reasons of this is stress and burnout. And I think with the changes in the workplace at the moment, we've got, I know I'm going a bit off tangent here, but we've got the increases in N&I. I'm talking to HR specialists that say we've got increasing redundancies, increasing restructures. That's going to put more stress on the employees that are left in the business. So I think now more than ever, it's important to think and focus and prioritize on your employees to make sure everyone is engaged and can be productive in their jobs.
Wow.
Sorry.
I have a question, but I think my question leads on to the next slide. So,
Okay, I can share.
yes.
Bear with me.
So we're looking at the neuro-inclusive customer journey. I think, Claire, this is you, and then I've got a question I believe relates to everything we've just been talking about.
Yeah. So I think this probably is quite good for Simon too, but supporting neurodiverse employees, which we've just talked about, can lead to a 50% decrease in sickness, absence, which are critical when you want to ensure a consistent customer experience. I know I was in a business that went through a really challenging time. We had high stress, high burnouts. The impact was on our customer metrics. So our customers weren't spending as much with us. We were getting poor reviews. We weren't getting as much engagement. And that they are linked. You cannot have one without the other. So if you have poor employee experience, you're likely to have poor customer experience. We've touched on this as well. I think implementing inclusive design principles. So as we talked, making sure that you are considering all those unique requirements and needs that your customer base may have. It can lead to a 30% increase in usability for all users, which is huge. When I talk to organizations, I'm just stop sharing, when I talk to organizations about customer experience, one of the biggest challenges in their customer journey is that somewhere there is friction. It's one of their touch points, and it might be tiny. It might require them to make a really minor adjustment, but the benefit and the impact to the customer will be significant. So yeah, absolutely. When we're looking at inclusivity and focusing and considering for a neuro-inclusive customer journey is absolutely essential. It's how people will feel, think, and behave. It has that much of an influence on them.
It does. And just to, if you think about that, so when we think about the core concepts of supporting, let's include the customer and the employee within the workplace at this point, what we're really trying to get, we're trying to get communication. Now, who doesn't want better communication, between their work employees, but also between the customer? So everything, like you said, everything we do, we also need flexibility. Customers love flexibility. Staff also need flexibility. We're then looking at assistive technologies as well. We couldn't do what we do today without some of the technologies. And if you're in a retail-driven environment, actually having technology at the fingertips of the individuals that walk in, that actually helps you sell things, whether it's targeted advertising or just somewhere that someone can go if they need some information, a help point or something like that. And then the other one is sensory environment, the sensory friendly environment. So important for customers who don't want to be overwhelmed when they walk into your phone, your office, or whatever that looks like. And very important for your staff as well. And then also, again, having those, and this is the 5 tenets effectively of a good workplace, but actually having those policies in place that support those individuals as well as supporting those customers. It all goes hand in hand.
It does.
So Simon, your company trains staff and leaders in neurodiversity awareness. How does that work exactly?
So what we try and do is, again, is educate people. That's where everything starts from, is the lack of knowledge. So the reason we talked about neurodiversity at the beginning and the reason that Claire talks about the customer experience is because actually for a lot of people, they just don't know. So when we think about what the training opens up, what the opportunities is to find out a little bit more, find out why the communication breakdowns are happening. Find out what sensory overwhelm means, find out what executive functioning means. And then we start to talk about dysgraphia and dyslexia and calculi. It's a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of understanding, and it's the belief as well, and we get this a lot, is I've got to make a huge change. Well, have you? Let's take communication. how can we be better at communication? Maybe I've got to change everything. No, what you've probably got to do is use clear and concise language in all of your communication, whether that's written, verbal. It's also providing different styles of communication, downloadable, screen reader, friendly PDFs, etc. Having slides, as you've seen today, the slides are quite friendly on the eye. It's about that interaction with you, with the staff member. And remember that neurodiverse individuals and can be managers as well as customers, as well as staff members. So you've got potentially this three-way communication that you really need to start supporting. So in a nutshell, that's exactly what we do. We enable individuals within the workplace, beyond the workplace, because the workplace for a lot of us is our homes, our schools, our community. So the workplace is defined as where you do stuff rather than actually go to be paid to do a job of work.
Thank you for that. And Claire, how do you see the legal and ethical considerations on this?
Massive. And I think it's something that businesses probably don't consider enough. As a business, you have both a legal and ethical obligation to your employees to provide a safe, fair, and accessible environment where they work. Now, I was talking to Simon about this the other day, but in legislation, neurodiverse individuals are essentially referred to as disabled, and that is the case in the Health and Safety and Equality Act, and the 2010 Disability Act. Apologies. So actually, if you are failing to engage and make sure that you adapt your environments for neurodiverse and disabled and people that maybe have different accessibility requirements, you could face fines. You could even face criminal liability. So directors and organisations should really be listening to this because they could be in court. Now, obviously, that is worst case scenario, but it is a real risk. It's really important that neurodivergence is considered in the workplace, but also in the environment where your customers buy from you. So whether they're coming to an office to do business with you or whether they are buying from you in a retail space, it's really important not only that you make sure there's accessibility, but to Simon's point, avoid harsh lighting, consider the environment, consider it to be a place where neurodiverse individuals feel able to shop and to buy from you easily. I think it is often overlooked. I think a lot of the clients that I talk to aren't even aware that neurodiverse is represented in the 2010 Disability Act, but it is. And it's really important that organisations make sure they've got processes in place, and to Simon's point, are engaging in training and awareness for those neurodivergent employees and customers. Excuse me.
And it should be pointed out that the 2010 Equality Act doesn't actually differentiate between diagnosis. So whether you're diagnosed or undiagnosed, however your neurodiverse difference manifests itself, you're fully protected. And we're talking about these fines. Marks and Spencer's recently, there are the high street retailers available, but were fined £55,000 for not providing a £3.50 screen reader for one of their staff members. We are seeing fines of hundreds of thousands of pounds. This is not now a point where organizations can choose to just ignore supporting their staff members. It's now becoming financially, it's not something your organization from a reputational perspective wants, let alone from a personal and individual perspective. That tribunal can take up to 12 months, and simply the legal fees alone can be in their tens of thousands.
Yeah,
Wow.
really good point.
Business leaders really need to wake up. We've got final 10 minutes. I think we've got one more slide, Claire.
Yes, we have. Okay.
Coming through now. And what is the cost of not investing in your employees? That's what we're here to talk about. Claire,
So,
over to you.
it's huge. I think Simon and us will do this together. So it is enormous. This is a massive number, 103 billion. And I think, Simon, you found it was 110 somewhere else. I think it depends where you probably look. The source was The Guardian. Is that right?
Yeah, it's fascinating because a lot of these numbers are built upon each other. So you have cost to the economy, you have cost to the social services, and then you actually have the human cost as well, because typically these types of figures, so this particular figure, whether it's 103, 110, 120, is a cumulative cost of economy and services. This is a direct as a direct result of, as you can see at the bottom in that cumulative. What this doesn't do is then talk about the additional life limiting potential leading to suicide, the life limiting, the isolation, everything else that goes along with a human and societal aspect. And suddenly that figure becomes 300 billion. And you're like, and that's just in the UK alone. So what are we doing on a global economic scale?
Yeah, it is significant. And just to touch on the terms absenteeism and presenteeism. So absenteeism, obviously, when people are not able to work, so they're off work, they're signed off sick, and they're not actually present. Presenteeism is something that's growing in the UK. It's really becoming a big problem. So it's when people feel they need to turn up to work, but they may not actually really be able to do their job and to have the level of productivity that they would normally have. So it could be they're going to work when they've got stress, they could have burnout, they could be neurodiverse, but just working in an environment that doesn't actually answer or respond to their needs. And it means they're not able to do the best, be the best of themselves. And the impact isn't just on the business, it's not just on the employee, it's also on the employees that are around them, it's on their colleagues that are having to work with this individual day in, day out, probably increase their own workload to take on board the declining productivity of that individual. So presenteeism is massive and growing. So the next stat is 51 billion. This is the specific cost to businesses of poor mental health, including the absenteeism, presenteeism, staff turnover that we just talked. So anything to add on this, Simon, apart from it's huge?
Yeah, so as you say, this is again another massive impact, and this is actually broken down. By far the highest is presenteeism. Presenteeism is in that sort of 30 billion pound mark. This is individuals who are just coming into the workplace. Maybe they're in fear. Maybe they're certainly not doing the best they can be. They may be coming in, sending a couple of emails. They're working a full day and they're not actually achieving anything, or they're coming in for 12 hours and they're still not achieving anything. You can see how that would impact. But also absenteeism. People now are taking more time off, in my opinion, quite rightly. From a stress perspective, you do not have to have a medical diagnosis of stress to take off a week's time off. And after a week or 7 days, you do have to go and see a medical professional. But people are exercising that right now because they are quite rightly very stressed in the workplace. And so that next level is absenteeism, which is about 11 to 15 billion. And then the remainder is made up of staff turnover. Why should I work for an organization that actually doesn't support me, doesn't make me psychologically safe, or has been fined? Again, we're seeing these things in the public domain. I don't want to work for an organization that doesn't put me first. And we're now seeing a generation coming into the workplace who are thinking differently. And actually, it's not how much money am I going to earn, it's how many well-being days do I get? What's your policy on gender identification? All of these things, we're starting to see consumers boycotting those companies that are now failing to do DEI, but we'll start to see the job market avoiding individuals or organizations that aren't investing in people.
That's it. I think Amazon came a cropper in the US because of that. I think they had massive boycotts. I think they've reversed their decision. But that just demonstrates the power of the consumer, actually. So I think that's great.
So what can companies do?
There is, and I think the thing is, the companies can do nothing. Yeah, individuals can do nothing. You can carry on the status quo and you'll be surprised at still getting exactly the same results based on doing exactly the same things. But I'm a bit biased. Of course, you can roll out training, but beyond that, you need to accept that training is the right thing. There's no point in training and we've seen this as well in the mental health first aid sphere. There's no point in training 100 staff to be mental health first aiders if fundamentally the culture is, I'm going to use the word foobarred, is not right in the first place. All you're going to be doing is throwing more bad money. You're going to improve individuals' lives. Going on a mental health first aid course is incredible, but what you're not going to do is you're not going to change that culture. You're not going to be able to make that person feel safer just because there's some mental health first aiders, or just because I now know a little bit more about neurodiverse needs. What you need to evaluate is, what's your strategy? What are you trying to achieve? And I know, Erty, you quite often speak to companies that are on that start of that journey. We don't know what we need. We need some policies. Let's write some policies.
Yeah.
That's only going to work if you've got a workforce that's going to follow and read those policies in the first place. Otherwise, you've got some very expensive shelf life. And then as well, get the managers done. Get them done first, please. It's great to say, I'm going to train everyone on the shop floor, first of all. Okay, you've now got a really educated shop floor, and you've got all your managers that were so busy they couldn't do the training, they couldn't take the time out to learn about this. Now they're being asked about reasonable adjustments. Steve wants a Ferrari. That's not a reasonable adjustment. What does that actually look like? So it's so important to get the managers not only to acknowledge that people do think differently, but also that they're able to spot those signs. You see it there is, when can I see when my team is failing, and not failing in a numbers way, but what are we doing as an organization that's letting them down? And Claire's going to talk to you very excitedly about inclusive workplaces.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about this already, but you are making a massive decision to exclude neurodiversity in your workplace if you aren't thinking about inclusive workspaces. It's really important, not just for neurodiverse, but for all of your employees. Everyone has unique needs. I'll be honest, I am neurotypical. I need quiet. I need absolute quiet workspace. I need to be on my own, probably in a meeting room, and it needs to be quiet to do my best work. You need to be making sure that you are, or you have, appropriate workspace and flexibility if people need to work at home, as an example, in a workspace that meets their needs, that you have those abilities in your organization and you're happy for your employees to do that. What you need to be thinking about is the productivity. What productivity do you want? It really is a bit of a trade-off. If you want your employees to do their best work and be their most productive, then you will be thinking about their inclusivity and making sure that you are considering that when you're looking at your workplace design and your policies around workplace. I think that's really critical. Anything to add?
I've just popped in there. If we do have any large organisations watching, and I know we're very much focusing and supporting SMEs, but the BSI actually put together a environmental design criteria for supporting neurodiverse individuals in the workplace. I've just dropped a little link to that. I think it's free to download, but you have to give your details away. But it's so important.
Yes.
Look
And I
after the
think
people
now,
and get the
sorry.
environment right. And I was just to say, look after the people and get the environment right. That's really how you start this, isn't it, Claire?
It is absolutely, and there's one organisation that I know that is an offices. They're a workspace. They are a flexible workspace, and they have engaged neurodiverse architects and designers to really make sure that they are speaking to those needs and they're getting it right. And I think more and more organisations need to do that. Another example of a great organisation that's done it is actually London Luton Airport. I'm a judge. I'll stop sharing the screen. I am a judge on the UK CXA Awards, sorry, UK CX Awards. And this year, London Luton Airport actually won a gold award for the best customer experience for vulnerable customers, because they really have looked at the whole airport to consider the needs of disabled and very diverse individuals. It can be done, and I think they've gone big, clearly. You don't have to. So I think that's a really good suggestion about the BSI document, Simon.
Yeah, and just as another example as well, like you say, London Luton Airport have been absolutely fantastic. There's a large organisation at Erty and Ross, in fact, I'm very familiar with, where we've worked in there, and as a direct result, and this is a large multinational organisation, as a direct result of that education, that first knowledge element, signage was changed. PowerPoints were changed. Wayfinder signs were actually for customers, for staff members were changed. That practical, very reasonable adjustments were put in place within days after that education piece. And typically you hear these large organisations are really difficult to implement anything, and we've got to put POs in place, and it's no, actually, if you get the right people that are passionate about it in these organisations, they will change that organisation from within. But for a lot of organisations, they don't know that change is needed.
That's it. And I think we did have one more point on the slide. Sorry, encourage sharing of needs without fear of stigma. We talked about psychological safety at length. It's really key that your employees are able to share their authentic selves and their needs. and to do it transparently and without fear of retribution, and that they will be listened to and considered, and actually what they're asking for will happen, because it's really important. So I think that is just the last point.
And on that point, I think Ross has put a really good stat in the chat. Henley Business School saying that there's been a 25% drop in the number of people who feel they can bring their whole self to work. And
Yeah.
it's challenging times out there. And thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, Claire. If there's any questions that anyone would like to post, please put it in the chat. And we are on time, guys.
I think there's one question that's come in, Erty. I think you mentioned it earlier that you were going to
Yes.
read out.
Yes, there's one from Ross. Is if there are so many undiagnosed ND individuals, how does a company, how does business, how do you make adjustments in work? Do you need a diagnosis?
As we said at the beginning, you do not need a diagnosis. And in fact, what we talk about this in reactive and proactive. Okay. And there's a wonderful slide, and you've probably seen it as well. It's a picture, and it's about that ability. There's people trying to watch a football game. And so there's a really tall person and a slightly less tall, and it's about equality and equity. And effectively, what you do is, in order to enable everyone to look, you give them all a box. That helps the medium-sized person because they can now see over the fence, but the small person, they've got a box, but they still can't see over the fence. So you've done something because someone said, I can't do it. So you've gone, oh, have a box. But what you should have been doing was taking the fence away or removing the barrier. And I think that's really important to think about. You don't need a diagnosis. You don't even need to know that 20% of your workforce, and let's put this into, if you've got 100 people in your company, 20 of them potentially are diagnosed. 40 of them might be undiagnosed. So by putting things in place, like reducing the harsh lighting, if you can, by introducing screen readers, by putting, what do you call it, that £3.50 screen shell to enable individuals, to enable people with dyslexia to read better, or pregnant women, or people who are tired, or people who wear glasses, or people who are stressed, or all this myriad of these individuals that are already in your workplace. So by creating that level playing field, that's what we're trying to do, is we'll create a level playing field whereby everyone can be the best that they can be. So when we talk about work adjustments, think about your PowerPoints, think about your email communication, think about, is there ways that I can do this differently and more effectively? And those reasonable adjustments will come on from there.
Thank you. Claire, do you want to add to that?
I think it's just, we talked about the psychological safety, but lead by example and start having those open conversations with your employees and start sharing about yourself and what you need and how you work best. And that hopefully will encourage individuals to share too. I think it really helps when there's a bit of leading by example going on in the organization.
Fascinating. Guys, I could talk to both of you non-stop. It's a fascinating subject. We will have webinar culture series number 2 coming out. We shall let everyone know when that is. But from my perspective, it really bugs me when I see leaders do things because it's a tick box exercise, but actually don't understand why they're doing it, and what a waste of money. They're better off not doing it in the first place. Take it wholeheartedly, understand why you're doing things, look at your strategy, and just do it properly. As you say, it doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It just needs to be done properly. We have no other questions in the chat, so I'm going to say thank you very much, guys.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much for having us on. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.